and welcome to a very special edition of the Terrace Scottish Football Podcast. My name's Craig Anderson and I am joined across the line via video, via the internet, by our dear leader Craig Fowler. And the reason we're here today is to just make a bit of an announcement about the future of the podcast. And it's a positive announcement. You often hear the future of it and it's going to be something bad, but I think this is going to be something really exciting for you all. So I'll just pass it over for you, Craig, to basically tell us what's happening in this new era of the podcast.
The simple thing to tell everybody is that the Terrace Podcast is now my full-time job and main source of income. I don't think there's really anything else that needs to be added to that. Well, obviously we're going to talk about more over the course of this podcast, but that's the headline.
Yes, and so that was an opportunity that I guess came around for you at some point last year, and I know from having met you 11 years ago, and I think I started doing the podcast 10 years ago, that it was something that was kind of your ambition. And I know at that point you had, it was before you started working for the Scotsman, you had kind of taken some time off to try and build up the podcast, which I think you did successfully in that era, to be in something that was certainly bigger by the end of that period than it was at the start. But this is hopefully your chance to take the next step with the podcast. And now that we've got a very committed support base, I guess, to try and build it up. Would that be fair?
Yes. And yeah, it's funny you go back to that because it's a very, very different time now, because back then it was kind of growing the podcast profile for doing a lot of articles, doing a lot of writing. Like at that point I wanted it to be kind of like, everybody listens to podcasts for years know, kind of like, I always kind of, I've followed the career of Bill Simmons in America, who'd somebody, it's like, because he was somebody I latched on at a time when I was still working in bars, and it was this guy who's working for ESPN and spoke about sports in the same way I did, wrote about sports in the same way I kind of do, with a very kind of informal, chatty kind of manner, bit cheeky, taking the piss. And so I latched onto that, and he had worked in bars, and it took a while for him to break into the industry, and he started his own blog and stuff. And then he started, it was Grantland, and then that became The Ringer, and they're articles and podcasts. Now, we don't do articles anymore, and there's no plan to start that again. But back then, we did our 2 podcasts a week, and on platforms that didn't have any ads. There were no money for that. So it was like, and then I was like, right, okay, I'll take a year to see if I can make money through a website, because people can do that. Was it enough? You need, for print alone, you need thousands upon thousands, hundreds of thousands of readers to make any money. So I made no money. I mean, I was basically supplementing it by, I was doing nightclub photography at the time. So getting up every morning, working 8 till 5, writing non-stop. To swear, that was good. That helped me become a journalist at Scotsman, because my writing got so much better. My proofreading got so much better, especially with my own work. And so it was beneficial, but it was then I would go out at night 3 times a week and take photos of drunk people, and then get up the next morning and do it again. So that was interesting. This is completely different, because there's obviously ads on the main show, and because, as you mentioned, our base, the Patreon base that we have are kind of loyal fans that have been growing throughout the years. And you also mentioned as well, the opportunity to leave. It was last summer, I was offered redundancy package from the Scotsman / even New Scotsman publications it was. I decided to take it. It was a good one. I could see the way the industry was going. I then asked you guys if it was okay if everybody took a bit of a pay cut per episode, because everybody, as again, people who listen to the show a lot will probably know, everybody gets paid per episode. So it's okay, well, that's not going to happen now in terms of I'm going to just get paid a flat fee, like a salary. A flat fee, a flat yearly fee, a flat monthly fee.
We all do, working for that flat yearly fee.
And everybody also have to take a bit of a pay cut per podcast, which obviously I'm tremendously grateful to everybody for agreeing to that. I set out a kind of plan.
I had to take out the plans for the 3rd kitchen in my mansion based off of that bit.
And then I took 3 months off, basically, because I had to see it my redundancy period. Legally, I wasn't allowed to do work for anyone else. So those 3 months were, good, a lot of fun. And then since December, since my redundancy period ended, I've been slowly kind of getting to grips with how this all works. And I suppose we can get into that now. But that's basically where we're at this point in time.
Yeah, so I think the first thing people will be, I guess, thinking will be in terms of you're talking about this, being your source of income. What are the plans? Are there any plans? Because I think the fear would be obviously that the free content stops. Are there any plans to change anything like that, or what is the plan going forward in terms of what will be available? What's changing essentially?
The only thing that's really changing is that there's going to be more free content. So the Patrons will stay the same. The Patrons have consistently been, we first launched them, it was just, well, Patrons have got better. And that's the thing, they will, I'll go into why they will hopefully continue to get better in the future. But basically, the Patrons will stay what they've always been, which is that the £2 a month tier, which is what we started out on. And then that was when, literally the only thinking behind that was, let's just get ourselves a bit extra money so that everybody does the podcast can have a night out a year. That was it. And we could pay for some equipment if we need it. That was it. That was all we had in mind. I remember thinking, right, if we get to 300 subscribers, then that'll be brilliant. And I remember I was in the pub with Sean we were just about to launch it. And he was like, we'll never get to 300 subscribers. Who the fuck would pay to listen to us? And he was wrong. Thankfully he was dead wrong. We shot past 300 very soon. And then we opened up more by introducing the extra 3 podcasts on top of that on the £5 tier. So if you're on the £5 tier, it's 5 podcasts a week. That's an average. Some weeks we only do 4, but some weeks we do 6 or 7. So that's going to remain exactly the same. What we're going to ramp up doing is, everybody's already noticed already, is video stuff, because the podcast landscape has changed. And if we want to change, and if this wants to continue to grow, then we have to change with the times. Now, personally, I don't really understand why anybody would want to watch a podcast. To me, podcasting is like radio. It is a secondary medium. I listen to podcasts when I'm exercising, when I'm cleaning, which isn't very often, but occasionally. While I'm cooking, that's the kind of favourite of mine. And yeah, like I walk, like I said, it's exercising, but I walk a lot of places because I don't have a car. And so that's using my podcast time. I don't think I would have the patience to sit and watch a podcast. However, the younger generation, Gen Z and the Gen Alpha coming up behind them, they're probably a bit too young for us at the moment, but they're coming. They like to watch podcasts, and so that's what we've started doing. We put out the main shows on YouTube, and it's then about creating little clips of content to go onto TikTok. So we started a TikTok account. We've got an Instagram account to put it on there, and even like smaller shows as we've been doing as well on YouTube, which then we're taking the audio to put on Patreon. And the one extra thing that we will do on Patreon starting quite soon, and something we'll definitely do, something we'll start doing quite soon, is when we record a show in person for Patreon, then I'll just put up a video of that as well. So that'll be kind of, so I don't want Patreon subscribers to feel like they're losing out, because we're focusing on doing YouTube stuff, and obviously YouTube stuff is available to everybody. We're putting the audio on Patreon, so if everybody just wants it in their own feed, and they're not really fussed about listening, they're not really fussed about watching video, they just still rather listen. That's going on there as well. So that is some extra content for them. But also, one, like for instance, myself and Rob done Beers and Mail, that was recorded. I've not clipped anything out of that because I don't think there was anything that would particularly pop off on TikTok or Instagram. But in future, when we do stuff like that, I'll just take the kind of main shot and stick that up as well. But if we grow a bit more, which we'll come on to, then I have ideas for other stuff.
Perfect. So you're talking obviously about the current thing, the current situation, things that people are currently getting. It's not really going to change. It's only going to improve, and we're not asking anything more necessarily from that group of people unless they want to. Obviously, the big change, as I say, you now work for us. So we've sent out your standard issue uniform, which you're wearing today on this podcast. What's the goal then in terms of that? Because you've said it's about growth. What is it that you're hoping will happen now that is it a case of trying to make the current product better so that more people get on board with it, or is there more than that?
There is. That's certainly a huge part of it. So when my first kind of couple of weeks, I basically tried to do too much because I laid out everything and I thought, well, this will be doable because I was doing a lot anyway. But then you get to like doing 40, approaching 50 hours of a working week, and doing it without the TV show was good, but the TV show's coming back soon. And I know when the weeks the TV show's on, that saps a lot of hours from your week. And I know that from years of doing it. So what I was doing was like going through every single podcast, listening to every single minute, taking out every single bit I didn't like in terms of people saying A or like stuff like that. And it was just too much. It was just too much in the end. But what I have been able to do is learn how to use Adobe Audition. Well, I've got Adobe Audition now. That's kind of another aspect. Downloaded the whole Audition thing, like Facebook, Photoshop, Audition, and Premiere Pro, which Ian used to do the videos. And I'm steadily getting better at that. So obviously, doing the videos is an improvement, but the audio, people should hopefully have noticed that the audio should be better. There's still wee tweaks to be made, and there'll be wee tweaks all the time because that's just always going to happen because you're asking people in different locations. If I was able to be there every single time, then the audio would be better, but that's just not possible. So that will improve. The type of content should improve as well. I said earlier that when we first started, the £2 a month tier was basically 2 shows a week that were done at the end of each podcast that we did. So after the Monday and Thursday show, we'd then do 15 minutes. And a lot of the times it was just like, right, what can we talk about? What is there to say? And we'd basically grab it on for 50 minutes, like, right, that's it, we're done now, kind of thing. But now we don't do that anymore. Instead, we plan out each podcast to be done, and everyone has a kind of real merit to it. And so that's something that will then continue to improve, because thinking about it full time, it was just hard before, because you have, like, if you're working for, like I was working for the Evening News, and you're thinking about Hearts stories all the time, like Hearts features, Hearts picture gallery, articles to write. You know, you're doing so much, and then you're also trying to think, right, try to think of other things to do for the Terrace, and it's like it got very hard to spread that little creativity I have as thinly across as I did. So that frees me up now, and I've noticed the last couple of months, like my phone, I've got a notes thing on my phone where every time I come up with a podcast idea, a lot of times I'll hate it after I've thought about it for a couple of days, but as soon as I come up with the idea, I just write it down immediately. And then that'll, and I want to do more. I want to do more interesting stuff as well, and more stuff that takes a bit more time. If people remember the podcast I done on racism in Scottish football around the time of the Black Lives Matter movement, I was able to do that because it was lockdown, and I had the extra time. And so now I'm hoping that especially now that I'm getting used to what my kind of weekly work is with, cleaning up the audio as best I can in as quick a time as I can, doing the videos. I'm getting better at that, so I'm getting quicker at that. I've already started doing interviews for a podcast I'm going to bring out. That's the kind of thing we don't normally do. And then there's plans to do more stuff like that in future.
Yeah, so it's a development of content. And I think you also mentioned when you worked in a different job, you were obviously having to do, if a Hearts story broke, then your employer, funnily enough, was the people who were prioritised over the podcast in terms of a reaction to it or something like that. That will obviously change as well now, that in the sense that when big things happen in Scottish football, we can hopefully get stuff out there quickly.
Yes, and that's what we're kind of looking for with the growth as well, because we want. So I'm on a wage now per year, but I said that, like I said earlier, everybody else took a bit of a wage reduction. For people to, as much as everybody else on the podcast fully buys into it, and I'm tremendously grateful for everybody for doing that, it's still hard to ask somebody, right, can you drop everything you're doing and do something now when it's only like, I don't know whether I should say what everybody's getting an episode, but it's really not much. It's not much at all. It's a kind of token fee kind of thing. There you go. That tallies up to give you something at the end of the month.
Imagine what the listeners think in your head, and maybe like divide it by 3 or 5, and you're probably probably it's good. We appreciate it, and it's better than when we were doing it for nothing. But it's certainly not life-changing money, as your salary is certainly not either. It's but it's a labour of love for many of us, and it's certainly not something that's about money, I think. But
no, exactly.
For the podcast,
But to become where we're reacting and use it as quickly as we can, you do have to give people the incentive that they can turn, because it's not just their incentive, it's also kind of convincing their partner, like, oh, I can make a decent wee bit of cash right now if I drop everything and go do this podcast. Whereas if you're doing it another time and it's like, oh, I'm only getting X amount of money, they're just like, no, I'd rather you stayed with me on the couch and continued watching the show. What are you talking about? But that's, I kind of rambled a bit there, but that's basically that we're not that far away from the goal of turning this into a proper Scottish football kind of, not news, but kind of comment site that we could just anytime something happens like that evening, right, who's available, who wants to earn what their time's worth, basically. And then it'll just become a lot easier, and it'll just open up the doors as well for other things. Like, so I don't want to be editing every podcast. And like I say, I have to I just have to, because I just don't have the time. I have to do a rush job on everyone. And I don't want to do that. I want each episode to be kind of picked through and the sound to be as good as possible. And for that to happen, we would need somebody who has studied sound. I've not done that. I've done a little bit of studying on video, but it wasn't really much. It was just a wee kind of course at night. And like a lot of it was just kind of working with cameras and stuff. And that we just use webcams. Like these are like proper. So it wasn't. So I'd like to get somebody to do video as well. So then that'll clear me up to just concentrate fully on the creative side of it and working on these podcasts that take a bit more time and a bit more effort. And, I acted like a journalist as opposed to just kind of acting like, we want that balance. We don't want to be like journalists. Our thing is purely that this is fans. I mean, I know that when we got Chris Owellamy on the show, he was very good, but the episodes with him on it, the figures dropped, and I kind of thought, well, the reason why that is that we think, oh, he's a bigger draw than we are. But no, people listen to us because they want a fan's perspective. They want a knowledgeable fan's perspective, fans who put in the research, fans who know what they're talking about. And so that'll never change, but we still want to progress further into being more kind of like, well, we want to be proper fan media. We are that already, but we want to be bigger.
Yeah, and I think that's the kind of the balance you've got. And I mean, in terms of that editing and stuff that you talk about, I mean, there must be 6 or 7 hours a week of content goes out across. Main shows are basically 2 hours worth, and then your Patreons, it can't be far off that. So you can understand the undertaking it is to edit all that, which is where, again, the opportunity, if it grows, there can be basically every single time an extra person signs up on Patreon, and this is not, I mean, it's not like some sort of Bono give us all your money Live Aid speech here, just to date it very terribly. I wasn't even alive then, but the reference makes sense to me. It wasn't Bono either, was it? It was Bob Geldof. But every single
that's going to pull in more of the Gen Zers, that.
Yeah. I don't like Mondays. But the 1985 that was, so we were talking about a 39-year-old reference from a 34-year-old man. That's what they want to see. Every extra Patreon that we get, or every person that goes up from £2 to £5 is, I guess, one step towards improving something. It's been the case since the podcast started. As I said, we used to sit around your flat, and it was like the same people all the time. We've now diversified the range of people because we've got bigger. We've now got equipment. I'm sitting here with a nice microphone that the Terrace Podcast paid for, that you listeners paid for, essentially. All of us have got that equipment. That makes the quality of sound better. I have to admit, when because you're very big on, although you said you're not an expert, so you're very big on the audio quality of the podcast. And I used to, like, you would go on about it quite a lot, and I would be a bit like, what difference does it make? And then you start listening to them now, and then if you ever listen back, because I know Craig Cairns did some excellent editing of some stuff that was like our 2014, 15 kind of era content, just as like kind of wee clip together shows, and the noticeable difference in the audio quality across that time. And so things like that make what the product is better, but it needs to, like, it doesn't come for free, I suppose.
Yeah, no, exactly. And in fact, there's new mics as well. There's new Yetis. So if you listen to Fraser Clark's audio on the podcast that he's done so far, I sent him out. So he's basically, Fraser's not joined the 15 yet, I would say. He's not joined the team yet. However, he's kind of, I don't know. He's on a trialist. He's on a loan. He's on a loan with an option to buy. And as part of that loan, I sent him a microphone. And when I had a look, there's a new Yeti out. But Yetis were, so there's the microphones we use. They're called Blue Yetis. And they were down to about 100 each. And his one was like 160. And you can tell with his sound, like, he's got a very good voice for radio anyway, but you can just tell that the sound with his is very good. It is a better sound.
This is a Chris Muller situation, Craig. How's the new guy getting the better?
That's a great reference. But that's what I was going to say. I now want, because I'm hearing that, I'm like, right, now I want everybody to have them. But there's just not the we'd immediately lose a lot of money if it was just I was suddenly then sent out 15 of those. So that's the kind of thing where my plan right now is to get out about one of them each a month to everybody. That's all we could really afford for the time being. But again, more people are supporting the Patreon. I mean, there's a lot of Patreon listeners like listen to this going, yeah, we already do enough anyway. But this is for the people who maybe don't subscribe and think, well, why should I? So this is us kind of laying out the reasons why it would be good.
And again, we're not doing a hard sell here. We're not the hard sell approach, which would be suicidal anyway, would be to say we're not doing any free shows anymore, or we're doing one more free. But it doesn't make sense, and we still want to put out that content. And there are plenty of people who, let's be honest, either like the podcast, don't like it enough to pay for the Patreon, like me with several podcasts that I listen to be honest, or plenty of people who can't afford it, and that's fine. We're not. There's no pressure on people, or we're not kind of judging people for not subscribing. But it's just a reminder of where it can, like what it can do.
Yeah, I mean, if after this nobody's like, if there's no uptick at all, I wouldn't be, well, A, I wouldn't be surprised, and B, I wouldn't be, saddened or downhearted at all. There's a lot of content out there, and part of the thing we'd say, part of the thing we've talked about is that we're trying to reach a kind of new audience. We're trying to expand it beyond. We're trying to show people what the podcast is about, so we get more people in. If that just increases and more people just become aware of the podcast, that's going to rise anyway. So but yeah, like I say, if anybody can help out at all of this, if anybody was on the fence, basically, I think that's the people we're kind of talking to. If anybody was on the fence and thinking, I thought about it, but I'm fine with the weekly podcast. Like I listen to the A2, and that's all I kind of need. But I wouldn't mind checking out the other stuff, but I'm not really that fussed, or I'll get around to it. That's the kind of thing. That's something I've thought quite a lot when there's 2 podcasts that I subscribe to, and one of them was very much, it was when Kermode and Mail relaunched. They done their main show, and then they had extra takes. We had more bonus reviews in it. So I was immediately right, I'm paying that. I think theirs is $3.50 a month or something like that, maybe £4. And I was like, right, I'm just immediately signing up for that. But there was another one I listened to where it was it was years. Years. So I was like, I'm going to do that. I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it. I'm going to subscribe one day in the future. And it took me ages, and I eventually done it. So if you're kind of like that, I guess what we're asking is, please do it sooner.
So yeah, that's kind of where we stand, and we hope that this is organic. You can't force this to happen. The only way more people are interested is if more people find out about it, and if the product gets better and better. And I think it's very good. I think there's not really anything else out there that's got as much breadth and depth as what the Terrace does. I'm really proud to be part of it, and I think you're proud of what the podcast is, and I think our listeners are as well, to be honest. So it's trying to attract more people along, and then that kind of happens naturally. I guess, is there anything else? Obviously, this is all quite new to you as well, Craig, in terms of like the full-time stuff. But you're saying you're still trying to find your feet. But could you maybe let the listeners, I suppose, in on any bigger plans that there maybe are like down the line for things in the future once it settles down a little bit?
Yeah, and that's another. Yeah, I meant to say this earlier, and I forgot when I was talking about getting people in to help with sound and to help with the video, because it'll free me up to organise things more like events. Like we had an idea when I first mooted this that we were going to do quizzes. So we'd do a quiz like 2 or 3 times a year, like a Scottish football quiz that fans could come along to. Probably Glasgow, I'd imagine, but Glasgow or Edinburgh, kind of one of the big cities. And people will come along and do a quiz, and we could have prizes and stuff and make it a decent night, and people will kind of talk and entertain the crowd during the periods when the questions get marked. But that takes a lot of work. That takes a lot of organisation. And it was something that I really wanted to do at the time, but as things have gone along, I just don't have the capacity for that. There's other things like we want to, when it's like deadline day, like just get like a rolling feed, like a kind of like a Twitch stream, but like it'd be myself like for probably like 7 hours, like from 5 until midnight kind of thing. But then
we could everybody turn that down.
But then like people drop in and out, and like that takes a lot of work as well. That takes a lot of preparation, a lot of planning. Don't quite have the time for that right now. Another one as well, we want to do more stuff. We want to reward the patrons more and give them more kind of rewards for their money. And that would also include doing kind of more, because we've done a Discord Q&A before. We want to do more of that. Again, it's more planning. It's everybody's kind of, as well with the budget being so tight as it is at the moment, through paying me enough to live, that you can't give like Tony. I want it to be fair and everybody to get the chance to do one podcast a week, and that's all we're really limited to. So you will hear voices occasionally twice a week, but that's usually because somebody else has dropped out. But you want to get the stage where if people want to do 2-3, if they have the availability to do 2-3 things a week, and to be on a YouTube video, to be on a podcast, to be on a live stream where we talk to our audience, like just so much stuff like that. There's just with more income, there just becomes so much more possibilities to do more fun things and to make it better for the audience.
Perfect. I mean, is there anything else you want to mention about this, Craig? I think we've covered all the changes that are happening, which is actually on the face of it for listeners not very much, but I think it's useful for people to understand what's happening with the podcast in terms of like you've probably noticed some small changes, but to know what the fact that Craig is now very much taking a leap of faith with this in terms of, because it's certainly wouldn't have been the easy option for you. There would have been other things you could have done that would have been a more secure future, I suppose, for yourself. But
oh yeah, absolutely. Like, it's obviously something I've thought about, and yeah, because it's long-term viability as well. So it's if you want the Terrace to be a thing that just goes on indefinitely and can then maybe be, we'll always kind of look to bring on people who are kind of younger. We started to do that, Amy Fraser, for example, and then it'll just, the hope is it's maybe still a bit of a long shot, but the hope is then it just becomes recognised as a Scottish football brand that is just there all the time, and you grow up with it and you pass it on to the future generations.
Yeah, and I guess the other thing to add would be that as a podcast, we always have been open for ideas, and if people have ideas of how they would like to see things change, if they have ideas of what would you be willing to pay £10 a month for? Like, if that's something that people are like, I'd actually like to pay more if I got X, Y, and Z. Like, we're open to suggestions for that, and also, it's very much always been an ongoing and evolving podcast. I think there's always something that's been changing the whole time. Yeah, and I think we have to keep kind of tweaking those formats, and the existing format will work for some people, so and the new format will work for other people. So it will be useful to get feedback. It's like in my work, like I'm just constantly asking people for feedback, and all you can do is act on the people you hear from, and don't just tell us you don't like something. Tell us when you do like something as well, I suppose. Which to be fair, our listeners are generally very good at compared to some other media organisations and outlets, I would say. We do get a fair amount of positive reinforcement, and that's nice. Keep doing that. If you like things, tell us, and if you don't like things, tell us also. All right, well, I think that, and if that's kind of everything covered on this, thanks to everyone for listening to this this kind of special edition of the podcast, I suppose. I hope that it's kind of answered any questions you do have. If there's any kind of further follow-ups and things people aren't sure about, obviously we can address them as well. Yes. But thanks to Craig for coming along to bear all about his. It's like having to make your own 5-year plan. It's like your electoral pledge. Like it's like you're standing to be the Prime Minister for the next 5 years, and how what am I going to do over that period? What's your manifesto? But thank you for sharing that with us, Craig.